That was quite the setup and a lot of pressure. But hopefully this will be good. I'm going to start way back here. In 1999, I knew that social technology was going to be a really, really big deal. What I hadn't realized was that not everybody had come to the same conclusion that I had. And I discovered this when I was kicked out of high school for building a website for a gay-straight alliance, a club that was apparently forbidden, but which I had not gotten the memo about. It turned out that all I wanted to do was connect people through this amazing new technology that I discovered called the web. And instead, I got the boot. It turned out that becoming an entrepreneur in social technology in my high school was not exactly the appropriate place to do that. So fast forward to 2004, I made my way out to San Francisco. Once I got there, I found a bunch of people who were interested in a lot of the same things that I was interested in: design, social, product, all sorts of things. And many of my friends would go on to create a lot of household names, names that you guys are probably familiar with, from WordPress to Flickr, Twitter, Instagram, and of course Slack. My own contribution to the era that became known as Web 2.0 was the hashtag, which was an idea that Twitter originally rejected as being too nerdy to ever work. And yet seems to, in the last 12 years or so, have had a profound impact on the way that people use social media to find and connect with each other. And it's hard to argue with the sheer volume of hashtags that are used every day. At last count, there's something on the order of 200 million hashtags that are used per day, or 2,300 that are used every second. And that's only on Twitter. That doesn't count Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, or anywhere else that people can type text into a text box. The hashtag has helped join conversations around social movements, from the Arab Spring to Black Lives Matter to the Me Too movement, and of course more. The products that we started to build in 2004 are now used by billions of humans all over the planet. And I had the fortunate experience of being there at the very beginning. But it's impossible to not consider the success that we've had, looking back, and not also see some of the negative consequences as well. Now, some of the problems that we are experiencing now have a lot to do with the way in which we've had to compress complex human interactions into their digital equivalent. Take, for example, the like button. You can imagine if you're a product designer coming up with a way for people to express that they like something, right? You create a button, they push it, they like it. But now when you place that action in a commercial context, like a Facebook page, suddenly the meaning becomes a little less clear. Did I like it because I want to subscribe to updates? Because I want to show my friends what I'm into? Because I just felt some affinity for the thing? It's not entirely clear what this action actually means. And we've overloaded a lot of these things. And this kind of confusion abounds in the social products that we use every day. And even with the addition of things like stickers and emojis and GIFs, it can still be challenging to know exactly what people are trying to convey when they communicate through these tools. Just take, for example, how this single emoji appears across different manufacturers' phones. Do these things all mean the same thing to you when you receive it as a text? Now, it's not like we're not trying to use these tools to communicate and connect. But there's oftentimes something that's very important that's lost in the translation of a thought or a feeling that's in one of our minds, being translated into a form that a computer can understand, and then being transmitted to somebody else for them to receive. What might have been meant as a joke can come off as being mean, or a casual reply can be easily misinterpreted. You compound these small miscommunications over time, and in a race to connect everyone, we're now each all having to cope with the constant barrage of messages, notifications, and updates, which has the cumulative effect of cheapening all of our communication. And we're really only now just starting to understand that too much social media is bad for us. It can be bad for our physical health, for our interpersonal relationships, and for our emotions. Connection was a worthy goal, but it turns out it was not sufficient. What we really crave is social technology that supports not merely connection, but also comfort and a sense of security. Without comfort and security, primates become emotionally stunted. They develop antisocial and abusive behaviors, just like the baby rhesus monkeys from Harry Harlow's famous experiments back from the 1950s. What he found was that even when wire surrogate mothers provided food, obviously a necessity for life, to these monkeys would actually prefer to spend upwards of 13 to 15 hours a day in the comfort of cloth-covered wire monkeys, even though they got food from a different source. And so in our context, our smartphones in many ways have taken the place of Harlow's wire surrogate mother monkeys. They manipulate us into believing that we're getting real comfort and security, but in fact it is not real. And so when we spend too much time on our phones and enraptured by our devices, we too develop antisocial behaviors like bullying, aggression, and depression. And I think Esther Perel has it right when she observes that people go to bed with their phones in all senses of the word. The last thing they stroke is their phone. The first thing they stroke is their phone. She can't imagine that doesn't have a profound impact. These devices that we've invited into our lives and have made part of us have transformed the rich tapestry of human connection and communication beyond anything that we can recognize. And so the challenge for technology designers, social technology designers in particular, is not to replace or get rid of our phones, because I don't think that's realistic, but instead to augment the technology that we already have to support pro-social behaviors by designing for things like self-awareness or introspection, mindfulness, empathy, and richer and more meaningful interactions between people. Now, there's a lot of founders in the room. As a founder, building a product is one way to scale the change that you want to see. But I think a bigger way of actually scaling the change that we need is to change the culture that surrounds founders themselves. And I can say this because I was there at the beginning of this wave of social technology. And as a founder myself, I also know how much my culture has affected the way that I think of, identify, and solve problems. Culture affects founders. And founders are a lot like artists. They like to see themselves and their own values reflected in the products that they create. And so products, therefore, reflect a founder's culture. And through their design choices, like the like button, the retweet button, and so on, they will ultimately influence users' behaviors. And over time, that founder's culture then can define, or at least inform, their users' behaviors. So as a founder's products become more widely used and adopted throughout society, like Twitter and Facebook, they will shift culture as a whole by changing behavior. Now, you want an example of this? Again, think about Twitter. The idea for Twitter came to Jack Dorsey because he was, on the one hand, a bike messenger, but he was also a political activist. He realized that SMS was a new channel that could be used for keeping his friends up to date, but for also disseminating information. But because of his time as an activist, Twitter from the very beginning had a very liberal policy when it came to what information was allowed on the platform. And that's led to a lot of recent angst and confusion about how to deal with content that is more objectionable or questionable in terms of its redeeming value for humanity. And as Twitter has become more popular, it's changed culture at large, primarily in how we talk and how we think. Now, this insight is not new. John Culkin, who was a contemporary of Canadian media theorist Marshall McLuhan, observed all the way back in 1967 that we shape our tools, and thereafter, our tools shape us. And so it's no wonder that we become much more anxious, more distracted, oftentimes less able to have deep or calm dialogue because of the chirpy nature of the social media that we use every day. Now, I don't blame the technology itself. I think, again, a lot of the culture that was around me and my friends and Jack in the beginning had a lot to do with this. And McLuhan also told us that the medium is the massage, which is later corrected to the message. And the message of social technology is that you can't separate or you can't understand technology from the culture that produces it. So again, if we change the culture of founders, I believe that we can change the nature of the social technology products that are in society. And so if we start by cultivating emotional intelligence and empathy in the next generation of founders, in the people who are going to create the next Twitters, the next Facebooks, Snapchats, Instagrams, and they include features that inspire emotional intelligence, then I think we might have a shot at making a change. And this is starting to happen. This is a feature that just started rolling out on Instagram that is intended to inspire more comment civility. And we need to inspire a culture of emotionally intelligent entrepreneurship, or popularize what Professor Scott Galloway calls wokeness as a business strategy. Because recently, when he was on the Pivot podcast with Kara Swisher, he observed that progressives are capturing the majority of income. And so therefore, there's a very smart business strategy in promoting and being very open about your progressive values. This is a new opportunity for brands to stand up for things, to stand up for values, things that they actually think are important for humanity. By the way, if you guys are new to this term, this is what this means. Now, I propose that we can do this by targeting 3 specific contexts. The first, and I think actually there's been a bunch of speakers who have talked about this today, including Greg and RK, is the individual and their relationship to themselves. Once that's been developed, then you can start developing deeper, richer, and more meaningful relationships with other humans. And then from there, we can start to define and require our relationships with machines to be different than they are today. Now, the good news is there are founders, I'm sure many in this room, who are already working on some of these things. But I'm going to introduce you to a few today. The first is Kari and Lisa Sullins, who founded Atlas to support the mental fitness and overall emotional wellness of founders. They offer things like retreats, resources, and an extended support network, including investors who believe in emotional entrepreneurship. Those investors understand that the startup game is not a sprint, but a marathon. And oftentimes, it's founder burnout that leads to their investments not working out. So Atlas is working to change the culture of founders to help them become more emotionally resilient by creating a context in which being vulnerable and asking for help is destigmatized. And this is incredibly important, as you guys know as founders, because you guys are supposed to magically have all the answers. Now, on the other side, from the product side, this is Ross Ingram and Christina Poindexter. They're building a product called Maslow, which is an AI companion that is designed to inspire pro-social human behaviors in humans by expressing empathy through nonverbal cues. I'll show you what that looks like. So this is Maslow. It's sort of an emotive orb that looks at the ways in which humans are engaging with it, and it responds like this. This is how Maslow expresses joy. This is when Maslow is amused. And when Maslow is surprised. Now, this is the kind of emotional technology that could be used to enhance human-to-machine relationships when embedded in things like voice assistants. These are a new class of emotionally intelligent entrepreneurs who are thinking deeply about these problems. And they are trying to create a new wave of human-nourishing social technology startups. And I believe that we have to move in this direction much, much faster, because it took us 30 years to connect 50% of the global population to the internet. But according to the UN, it's only going to take us 10 more to connect the rest. And so if we want the future of social technology to be different than what we have today, we have our work cut out for us. Just think, 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, Instagram didn't exist. Now it has over 1 billion users. Imagine how many more Instagrams will be created between now and 2030, hopefully by people in this room. And also consider the impact of these new social technologies on the developing world, where most of this new connectivity is going to come from. A lot of the people in these places have never even had computers or phones, and for the first time they're getting online. It's going to define so much of their consciousness and of the way that they relate to each other. And my hope is that the founders of those future Instagrams and other products will be culturally aligned with Kari, Lisa, Ross, and Christina. We have to get this right. And we will if we start today. So remember all the way back in '99 when I got kicked out of high school, right, for building a website. Well, I started my journey in technology over 20 years ago. And if I could go back and have a conversation with myself then, do a little time travel, as someone who's a founder now and has had the experiences that I've had, I'd of course encourage my interest in computers and social technology and design, human factors. But I'd also encourage myself to develop the technology of myself, my ability to know myself, to be curious, to follow my intuition, to fail and to learn and to grow. What I think I'm saying today is specifically relevant to people who maybe despair about the future or look at social media and are confused about how things are going to get better. Now, this message is also for those of you who use hashtags every day and never thought about the fact that it might have actually been created by a person no different than you. A person who simply wanted to connect people through social technology. I started my journey quite a while ago, but a lot of you guys have grown up with social media. And that, according to me, puts you in the best position to change it. So if you don't like the way that social media makes you feel, or the way that you see people treating each other online, you can change it by first developing the technology of yourself. Once you've done that, I encourage you to go build the next Twitters, the next Instagrams, the next Facebooks, or ideally something way better than any of those, so that your products then can help the rest of us and encourage the rest of us to become the technology of better humans ourselves. Thank you.